The concept of diversity encompasses acceptance and respect. It means understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing our individual differences. These can be along the dimensions of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, or other ideologies. It is the exploration of these differences in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment. Today's training will focus on white privilege and the relationship between white privilege and inequities in the American education system. White privilege is the inherent advantage possessed by a white person on the basis of their race in a society characterized by racial inequity and injustice. Professor Robin DiAngelo at the University of Washington is a leading researcher in white privilege and systemic racism. Her research explains the misconception white people have about race. She explains that white Americans generally view racists as white individuals who consciously believe that people of other races are inferior and therefore intentionally seek opportunities to be mean to them. What many white people do not understand is that racism is a system that is infused across all institutions, traditions, politics, practices, languages, and norms. It is a system all people live in, and none of us can be exempt from its forces. Professor DiAngelo states, white people apparently don't understand socialization because they believe that they can be exempt from the system just because they say they are or see themselves that way. What white people need to do is start from the premise that they have been shaped by the forces of racism, that they could not have avoided that, and therefore the question they must ask is very different. Professor DiAngelo explains that white people need to stop the deflection, denial, defensiveness, and explaining it and recognize that they are born into a racist system and are therefore racist. Most people of color do not expect white Americans to not be racist, but how white people can move forward is to openly talk about racism and through open conversation do less harm. Three manifestations of white privilege in the education system are teachers assuming students with names that are more common among African Americans and Latinx communities will perform less well in exams than students with names that are more common among white Americans. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than their white peers starting in preschool. Students of color often experience microaggressions both from teachers as well as their peers, which can both be physically and psychologically exhausting. Dr. Van Dyke completed her dissertation on uncommon black names in the classroom. She found that students with distinctive black names were subject to disrespect, stereotypes, and low academic and behavioral expectations from their teachers. This resulted in strained relationships, changes in future career choices, and self-esteem issues, ultimately leading to fewer educational and economic opportunities for students of color. Unlike students with typical white American names, these students were not given the privilege of respect from their teachers, and this ultimately contributed to many of them performing poorly in school and losing faith in their own abilities. To understand white privilege, consider 2 students, Susie and Shayla. When Susie walks into the classroom on the first day of school, the teacher smiles. When Shayla walks into the classroom on the first day, the teacher looks a little concerned. Not a huge change of expression, and likely not something the teacher intended to do, but a subtle difference Shayla can recognize. The teacher has been socialized to believe that Susie will behave better than Shayla, and she cannot hide this in her response to the children on the first day of class. Susie did nothing wrong. Shayla did not do anything wrong. They both showed up to class on time and ready to learn. However, Susie will have an easier time because her teacher believes she is ready to learn and is not worried that Susie will have low test scores. However, Shayla will have to work twice as hard to gain acceptance from her teacher, and since she is spending so much mental effort on getting the same amount of help that Susie is automatically given, Shayla has less time to spend on her actual assignments. This understandably could result in lower test scores and an inability to focus in class. Susie is privileged. Even if she does not come from a wealthy family, she is privileged because of her race. Shayla does not have this privilege. Because she is black, the teacher treats her in a way that is less encouraging and open. Not all teachers will give white students privilege in this exact way, but white students, no matter what their socioeconomic background, are given special privileges in every classroom in the United States. This is why teachers and administrators in disciplinary roles suspend students of color at a higher rate than white students. While school officials often assume that white students can learn from their mistakes without dire consequences such as suspension, minority students are not given the same treatment, resulting in a higher suspension rate for minority students than white students. Here, a lack of white privilege for minority students leads to many minority students being forced to miss days of school. Most white parents do not recognize that their children are being treated better than parents with children of color. They think nothing is wrong or that their kid just behaves well. However, assuming the system that determines which kids get suspended and which kids don't is denying the white privilege that all white students have. White students are given more second chances and days to stay in school than students of color, and this has an effect on academic outcomes. This is racism. As students of color know, continuously dealing with these stresses can lead to mental fatigue. Claudia Rankine addresses this in her book Citizen, an American Lyric. In this work, she exposes microaggressions that she and many other persons of color have experienced. Dealing with microaggressions becomes a part of daily life for many. They contribute to mental exhaustion, and as a student, when people of color have to worry constantly about how they are being perceived and how people are acting aggressively towards them, focusing on classwork becomes increasingly difficult. White privilege allows white students to not have to suffer from these microaggressions. Not recognizing the fact that these microaggressions are happening against people of color is racist. Looking at white privilege and the effects of not having white privilege can make the prospect of racial equality seem impossible. Claudia Rankine calls all of us to action. She states, "Everyone, black or white, man or woman, young or old, must contribute to undo the corrupt racial system we exist in. However, in order to do this, white people must recognize that they are racist. Growing up in a racist society means being racist. White people can fight their biases to try and do as little harm as possible, but they cannot deny that the system privileges them. White privilege must be studied because the first step to solving a problem is recognizing that one exists. There are many advantages to a diverse learning environment and workforce, and understanding privilege can help us contribute to building these spaces and making them inclusive and safe for everyone."